to the Level Up Artist Podcast. We're your hosts, Adriana May and
Jackie Sanders. We're two art professionals sharing forward the advice and business lessons we have learned along our creative journeys.
We talk to artists, leaders, and art professionals to demystify the creative process and discover new ways to succeed as a career-minded artist.
If you find value in these conversations, please go ahead and subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you'll be notified when we drop a new episode every Tuesday. On today's episode, we're so excited to have a fellow North Carolina artist, Rachel Castaneda. So welcome, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here with us to discuss your creative journey, your thriving art career, and growing an audience on social media. But before we dive in, we want to share a little bit more about your background for our listeners who may not yet be familiar with your work.
So Rachel is a self-taught artist and muralist based out of Apex, North Carolina. Originally from New York, she grew up with a deep passion for art and lettering. Despite taking advanced art classes, though, in high school and in college, Rachel initially viewed art simply as a hobby and served as an elementary school teacher for 12 years. In 2016, friends and acquaintances began hiring Rachel for lettering work, leading to a side business focused on hand lettering, chalkboards, and signage. In 2022, she painted her first large-scale mural, and after posting it online, her mural side of her business quickly grew momentum. She resigned from teaching in 2022 to pivot her focus on murals and staying home with her children. Muraling has brought Rachel immense joy, and she is very excited about the future of her business and artistic practice.
And of course, this is the formal intro for our listeners. So, Rachel, how would you describe your work to someone who has never seen it before? Keeping in mind, a lot of our listeners may be in the car or maybe they're painting right now while they're listening.
Yeah, so I paint large scale murals. Most of the murals I create are for schools or businesses or in public spaces. My work is mostly client work. So when I'm creating murals, I am matching a certain aesthetic or branding of my clients. With that, most of my murals are also, they have vibrant, bright colors, crisp lines, lots of color blocking. So there are consistencies throughout, even though I'm not necessarily putting my personal style into every single one, because I'm creating it for the client. But yeah.
I love that. And I think there definitely is that cohesive aesthetic of the vibrancy, the crisp lines, but then you're kind of applying that to various companies' branding, which is very fun to watch, both from seeing some in person, but also on social media, which we'll get into later in the conversation. But real quick, I feel like your journey, even just hearing that little bit about like you've always been interested in the arts, very creative, even taking upper level advanced courses, but always kind of felt like, okay, that's maybe not a viable career path, or what am I going to do with that? Is a common conversation we have with a lot of artists. So when did you feel like you could first call yourself like a proper professional artist?
Yeah, so I've always created art, but like you said, I just never thought it could be a real job, which is so sad because in today's day and age, I feel like we should be so exposed, especially now with the internet and social media. I feel like that's what really triggered me into realizing, wow, I can do this. But in 2022, I resigned from teaching, and that was the year I had been doing it as a side business for a few years. But in 2022, I painted my first mural. I made myself an LLC, got the liability insurance, made sure if I still paint, I'm covered. And I feel like that's when I would say I considered myself a true artist. But truth be told, I feel like if you're creating art, you're an artist. I do deeply believe that everyone can be an artist. So many people love telling me they can hardly draw a stick figure, but I feel like everyone's creative in some way. And although officially, I guess I would say 2022, I don't know.
I love that. Yeah, we get that comment a lot also. Having public facing studios in Raleigh, people like, wow, I don't know how you do what you do. Like, I can't even draw a stick figure. But then
people love that line.
Yeah, they love it.
They
It's the go-to. But then you talk to them, and especially, I know at least for my work, a lot of like engineers, and I don't know, planners, the technology world, programmers are drawn towards my work. And I'm like,
Mhm.
it's very similar. Like you are
Yeah.
imagining something that does not exist, and then you are making the steps to bring it to life. Like you are
Yeah.
envisioning something, coding it, and bringing it to life. Art is not that different than that. And they're like, oh, I guess you're right. I'm like,
Mhm.
yes.
Yeah.
Everyone is an artist in their own way.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
absolutely. Hey, problem solving, that's as creative as it gets. And that's what we do as
That's
artists,
true.
right? We
That's
make
true.
a problem,
Mhm.
or the client makes the problem, and we try to solve it. Or we identify the problem and then we try to solve it. Oh, you need more foot traffic. Let's get you a mural. But speaking of murals, since we're on that topic, let's talk a little bit about your process for a mural project. Do you start with physical or digital sketches? I know you mentioned the client is something that you're trying to meet their expectations, but how much of their input affects the final design? And then
Yeah.
how did you develop, kind of like the style and technique you're leaning towards? And I can
Yeah.
repeat it questions if
Yeah,
needed.
absolutely. I've definitely had a few times recently where clients have reached out and I could tell that the style they're looking for does not align with like something I could create. So I have, at the beginning I was taking any job I could get my hands on, but now I'm definitely gearing more towards like making sure they look at the body of my work and can visualize that like something within my style, I talked about my style a little bit. It's more, matching with theirs, but that they can see something I create in their space. But normally a client will come to me and from there, I'll send them general information. I have a PDF I created that just has information about me and my business. It has pricing information, work samples, a little bit about the process, and it just sort of gives them a taste. A lot of people haven't ever hired an artist before, so it just kind of gives them a general idea. And from there, I love to meet in person if possible. A lot of artists won't do this. They'll prefer either a phone call or just going back and forth through email. But if they're local, I do normally try to meet in their space. It really helps me to see the whole space. Just a picture of the wall doesn't show me what's behind it or next to it or, around the corner. And that's all helpful when you're planning a mural and coming up with a design. So we'll normally meet in person and then we try to go from there. I do use Procreate on my iPad for creating my sketches. It's super user-friendly for anyone out there who's new to using the iPad and stuff. It's about as easy as it can get. There's so many great tutorials and stuff too. But I create all my drawings digitally on the iPad. And then I always put the drawing onto a photo of the wall to really give the client that full vision of what it's going to look like.
Mhm.
And then I normally do revisions. I include 2 rounds of revisions. I just did like my 4th round for a client without charging them extra, even though in my
Nice.
contract. Yeah. Oh, I should have mentioned contract. I always use contracts before
Perfect.
doing the design work, and a deposit's required to start that step. But yeah, that's pretty much how we do the revisions, and then it's painting and, you know, get up there and all the physical work.
Nice. Are you doing any, even if it's like any kind of like mock-ups or Pinterest boards or anything like that before you get to the contract phase? Like I know
Yeah.
some
So
artists will sketch a quick and dirty as they call it and
yeah,
just do something, even if it looks like a little bit of a collage, or they'll even use
yeah.
AI tools to like make something
Yeah, I haven't
before.
delved too much into AI, to be honest. I'm like such a grandma in that sense. I really need to start using it more. But I will create mood boards sometimes just from Googling images. So I recently did a mural for a hair salon, and their whole vibe was like legally blonde, hot pink, like, Miami. And I created a mood board with like all different like lettering styles and quotes that I found online. And then she was able to pinpoint, like, I love the color scheme here and I love the lettering style here. And we kind of worked it together. Sometimes clients come to me and they show me a picture of one of my murals I did already. And they're like, I love this one. This is what I want in our branding colors. And then I don't create a mood board then because,
You can go
I know
straight
what
to
they want.
contract at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. I love this so much. I know,
Yeah.
I'm like I'm definitely on camp and I'll tell everybody off I'll scream it off the rooftops if necessary. I'm like, if you're doing murals, digital, digital, digital.
Oh,
Use the
absolutely. Well, that's
tablet,
the
use
ones I
the tablet.
just today, I was creating another revision and it's so much easier to like go in and tweak it. It's not as easy
And
as
to
the
do
client always
revisions in
thinks it is.
person. sometimes that's the way to go too. I just did one where I literally that we were doing the email thing. Like we met
Mhm.
in person, like you said, but then the revisions kept coming and it was like hard to determine because she was like, "Can you make this part a little bit bigger, this a little bit brighter, this I'll like move this over." But that's hard to convey over email because I'm like, how
Mhm.
much bigger, how much smaller, how much brighter, how much darker, like things like that. And taking the iPad to the client and literally right there on site, it was like, she's like, "Can you make more of these fish?" And I'm like, "Yeah, they're all on separate layers. Duplicate, duplicate, change size, colors." Like we literally finished the design in person. So yeah, yeah,
That is
that
so
was crazy.
smart. The one that I was just
Yeah.
wrapping up today, I should have done that because it's one of those situations where there's just so many cooks in the kitchen on this one. So I'd like
Mhm.
send it to the owner and then she's consulting with like 10 family members. And it's
Yeah,
just like
yeah,
she loves it, but then she's like, "Oh wait, can you actually do this?" And sometimes, yeah, it's a really easy change, but sometimes they think it's an easy change and it like when you move one thing, you have to move 10 other things and it's hard to convey that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's where if you're getting one of those, and this applies to all our listeners, if you're getting one of those that keeps coming back with the revisions, which is fine, they're just trying to, they still want to work with you. They're not trying to be difficult. They're
Right.
just like, they have this vision, but they can't necessarily articulate it in a way through
Mhm.
email that like translates to how we would edit it. So I
Exactly.
found that, yeah, also them seeing in person, you move things around and change, they're like, "Oh, that's why that color doesn't work there because if I
Yeah.
change it to what I just asked you to,
Yeah.
now those two colors look almost the same." Exactly, that's why I made it this
Yes.
way. So it kind of helps explain also some of our creative process. But
That's really
anyways,
so
okay,
smart.
okay, I
I
love
need
that
to
our
keep
process
that in
is very
mind.
similar. Yeah.
Yeah, which obviously that's that element of like like for our listeners, if you're doing digital mock-ups, it's not always helpful like day one to be in person and designing the entire thing with them. But if you're 90% there and really just trying to fine-tune those nitty-gritty details, then that can be helpful in person. It's not necessarily great. Let's spend 6 hours in person designing
No,
this together. Like
no,
Right.
neither
no,
side wants that.
No.
But it
cringe.
can definitely
No.
be a big tool. That's been one of my big goals of 2024, is learning the digital mock-ups. And we're still going through the hurdles. We're
Oh,
going through it. But so far, I've really enjoyed it because, yes, the second you're like, oh, I want to add this color again, I'm like, well, my initial mock-up was literally hand drawn. So I guess I'm tracing this and then recoloring it in with colors. I
oh
don't
yes. Once you're all the way in, it'll change your life. And I could show you, I'll have to show you sometime on the iPad. Like I found
know.
all these tricks
Yeah.
that like no one taught me this. I just kind of stumbled on it, like how to really make it look like it's on the wall, not the
Yes.
Yes.
digital, like, and I didn't invent this. Obviously people do it, but
Right.
I
No,
mean, it took like me just fumbling around to figure out, like I've sent people mock-ups and they're like, wait, like that's on the wall. They don't
yeah, they
understand
not
that
know.
this, I'm like, what do
Yes.
you?
Oh my goodness. Maybe we need to coordinate like a local artist iPad mock-up meetup where everyone's like share you like your
Yeah.
top 5 tips. Cause every time I meet up with other muralists, it's the same way. Like, oh, well, did you know you could just do this, this, and this? I'm like, I've been trying to figure out a way to do that for so long. And so it's
Yes.
like pages and
Whenever we
pages of
meet in
notes.
person, I'm bringing my iPad so I can show you because it's
Oh
Yes.
great.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I love it.
Jackie, we will teach you the ways of the iPad. You will never go back.
Yes.
At
Yes,
least
it's
for
very
murals. At least for
fun.
murals. Yeah.
It's very fun. But kind of getting back on track with mural clients, Rachel.
Mhm.
How do you typically obtain your mural clients? Obviously, you started by your first handful of friends and like acquaintances, friends of friends, posting on social media. But have you found to be like best strategy for obtaining new clients?
Yeah, so it's funny, the very first client, the first mural I got hired for was before I ever had really painted a mural. And it was my former principal of the school I was teaching at. He came to me, he was opening a brand new school that was being built in Wake County. And he was like, I'm wondering if you'd be interested, like I'll hire you, like I'll pick, because I had done like some free little jobs, like when I was teaching around the school I worked in. So
Yeah,
he
you're like
knew
always
that,
had the best chalkboards, always had the
yeah.
best design layout, I'm sure.
Yeah, so he knew that I, dabbled in art and stuff at the time.
Mhm.
And he said, I'm interested in hiring you to paint at the new school. And I had never done a big mural before. So I said yes right away. I didn't even pause. But then I was like, oh shoot, I don't know how to paint a mural. So I went to my daughter's preschool. It was like, a half-day church preschool. And I was like, can I paint on one of your walls just to see, I don't normally advertise like you should paint a mural for free, but if it's like for a little church preschool or in someone's house, a friend's, like, just to see if you like it and whatnot, then, I say go for it. So that was what I did. They paid for the supplies and I painted this little mural for them. They ended up hiring me back to do more work, which was awesome. So that was the first mural I painted. And then I got hired at another school. I ended up doing like 4 murals before the first one that principal hired me for. Like it just they kind of fell in my lap. It honestly was more luck than anything. But once I had a few in my portfolio, they just started coming in. And then I quit teaching officially because at that time I was still teaching when he asked me to do that first mural. But it wasn't until like 10 months later I actually painted it. But to find clients, a lot of muralists really rave about outreach. And early on, I was like, all right, I got to get all these clients. I took like a webinar with an artist who's phenomenal and shares so much information. I made an outreach presentation and I started emailing. And to be honest, I haven't gotten a lot of traction with the cold emails. I know a lot of people do it and it's all about numbers. You have to send like thousands of emails, which I didn't do that, but I haven't really had a lot of luck with that. My luck has been in networking. And I actually joined the Apex Chamber of Commerce pretty early on. I don't even know why. I kind of was on a whim. I was like, I'm going to join and go meet local business owners. And that was the smartest thing I did because when I go to these events, I'm the only artist in the room.
Right.
So there's great networking events you can go to as an artist where you're meeting other art professionals. But the smartest thing I did was join. I'm talking to people who work in insurance and, own local businesses. And, it's great because you introduce yourself at these events and they're like, oh, what do you do? And when you say an artist, their eyes go wide and they get all excited. And although I haven't booked directly with too many clients from the Chamber of Commerce, they have referred me to so many people and I've gotten so many jobs that way that, they're all business owners who know another business owner who said they needed a mural and they're like, oh, I know someone. And it's kind of worked out. So that sort of networking for me has been, really great.
That's amazing. And I've kind of had a similar experience in terms of those in-person networking events because there's like a lot of people in insurance, a lot of people that like maybe work in tech where they're just like excited to talk to someone that does something different, catches them off guard. They always like sit up a little bit straighter. They're like, oh, I used to paint in high school and I did photography, or like you hear a lot of stories about like people's kids, and it's so funny, which I think is such a fun part about the arts community is like when you talk about what you're doing, it almost feels like it gives other people permission to be excited about it too. Like that passion is just contagious. And so yeah.
And I think like walking around, I have actually a story about one time I was working from a coffee shop in my town, and in walked the mayor of our town. And I had never met him before. I knew who he was. He's very well known and like beloved in Apex, Jack Gilbert. Everyone loves him. And in he walked, and I was like, I'm just gonna go say hi. So I walked right up to him and I handed him a business card and I said, my name's Rachel, I'm a local artist. I said I was in the Chamber of Commerce, and we just started chatting and then went on our ways. And it was a few weeks later that he called. I had a call from an unknown number and he left me a message. He was like, I have someone looking for a mural. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. I didn't think much of it because, people want different, who knows how big it was or whatever. So he connects me with this person, and I go to meet with them, and it was for a development near my house. And I still wasn't even really thinking that it was like a huge job or anything. But I walk into the meeting, and I'm always very professional, but I wasn't fully prepared. It's not like I had a presentation. I didn't know what they were looking for at all up to this point. I had just known I'd been in contact with this girl, Katie, and we ended up meeting with multiple people. They wanted these 2 huge murals. It ended up being like the biggest project I'd ever booked. And it just worked out perfectly. And it was all just because I went up to the mayor. And the funny thing was, in that meeting, they went on and on about how much they love the mayor, the one guy who was in charge, he loves him. And he wanted his portrait included in the mural, which was, I had never painted a portrait in my life. I was scared to death, but I said, yeah, definitely. We'll paint the mayor in the mural. No problem. So, and it was kind of a full circle thing because the mayor had passed my info along, and then I ended up painting him in the mural, and he ended up coming to see it not long
That's
ago. But
amazing.
it was just,
You're like, I love the mayor too. He got me this referral. Like,
yeah.
there's my best friend. Let's go.
Yeah, it was pretty funny, but it was just kind of this funny thing. And they ended up now hiring me for 2 more.
Nice.
So what went from just like a random, hey, my name's Rachel in a coffee shop, went into the 4 biggest murals like I've painted so far. So,
That is
well, I haven't
awesome.
painted 3 of them yet. They're coming this fall, but
That's okay. But
Yeah.
leaning into that network, awesome. That is amazing.
yeah.
Some
Yeah.
hot tips right there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge insider knowledge about that. Which I guess that brings me to my next question of if there's an artist that's just getting started with murals as an income stream, what advice would you give them for just getting started?
I would say try not to be too intimidated by it. I think murals obviously are intimidating to a lot of people just because they're so big. But honestly, like if you can paint on a canvas, you can paint a wall. You just, and I'm not saying it's easy because it is hard and comes with its challenges, but I mean, do a little research and like you can do it because I hadn't really painted in years and I have a big painting background. It's funny because some people who I'm friends with and stuff, I think who didn't know I was really into art before, thought one day I woke up and decided I'm going to paint murals, which is not the case. Like I've always been involved in art and creating art like in my home and stuff. But if you can paint, you can paint a mural. It's really not as scary as it seems.
Mhm. Love it.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, what is one challenge that you had to overcome when painting large scale that you didn't expect, and how did you overcome it?
So I would say the physicalness overall, it really does take a toll on your body. I've always said like, I don't know how many murals you can paint in this lifetime. So I'm trying to do as many as I can now. You're standing, the longest stretch I've ever gone, I've painted for practically 12 hours straight before stopping to eat on site, use the restroom. But other than that, like you're on a ladder, one arm's up here, the other arm's holding the paint. It really takes a toll on your body. And I actually, early on the same year that I painted my first mural, I started getting really sick and I was having really bad joint pain and I thought I had carpal tunnel and I had been doing a lot of signage and chalkboards and stuff at that time. So I thought maybe it was all related. I was like, oh my gosh, it's how I'm using my hands. Cause like I'm, sometimes holding things too tight. And it got so bad. There was one day I woke up, I was still teaching at the time and I couldn't leave my house because I literally couldn't turn the doorknob. My husband
Oh,
had to open the door because I could
wow.
not turn my doorknob. And that was when I was like, all right, something's like seriously wrong. I need to go to the doctor. And in the past, I had been diagnosed with Hashimoto's, like thyroid disease, which a lot of people have. But it's an autoimmune disease. And so from all my research at that point, RA kept coming up. And I was like, oh man, like, do you think I could have RA? Like, that's just what everything kept pointing to that. But when all the blood work came back, they did a whole autoimmune workup. I ended up getting diagnosed with lupus. And
Oh,
from the lupus, I have inflammatory arthritis. So that's for me like a huge thing because my hands sometimes get super stiff. I am so lucky that the medicine works great for me with my body right now, but I don't know what tomorrow will be like, at any time that could change. And I could have a flare up or something like that. So it's really been, I have to like constantly remind myself to take care of my body and, I only have one.
Yeah,
yeah.
especially those
Take
like,
breaks, exercise.
Yes.
yeah, there definitely is
Flexibility.
like that endurance game with murals. Because to your
And for
point,
anybody, not just someone, not even someone who has something wrong, just like anyone, it's so hard. And with murals, the scary thing, it really is important to have income streams going on because if you fall and break your leg, you're out of luck. I mean,
Yep,
you don't want to I mostly do murals, but I try not to put all my eggs in the one basket because you really never know.
that's right.
yeah, man. But with that, you also do an amazing job posting about your projects on social media. And so obviously as business owners, mentioning that we have multiple income streams doing panel paintings or prints or mural design mock-ups, obviously. But having the marketing hat that we all have to put on if you are choosing it as an entrepreneurial path. And you have an incredible following on social media. That's how we first connected. I absolutely love watching all of your videos. I feel like they're so engaging with like bringing people along the project with you, which I just very much enjoy watching. And so I am curious with that audience on social media, really producing digital content is a whole other job essentially as part of your business. So how do you feel like that impacts your creative flow or shift in your routine,
Yeah.
whether before the job or like even on the job site itself?
Oh, it definitely does. So I didn't always, I honestly stumbled upon having a large following. I had a few things go viral and got really lucky. I'm not an expert by any means in social media. It's so funny because early on, that was never like a huge goal of mine. Like, oh, I want 1 million followers. Not that I have a million, but you know what I mean? It never was something I was really trying to get. And some people really do spend so much time following what all the experts recommend. And I did not. I luckily just had a few things go viral, got really lucky, got a bunch of followers, and people constantly will message me questions and stuff. And that was sort of when I started then posting in my stories and sharing more behind the scenes and stuff after the following came along. So I think some people have the opposite where they're posting their process and people start following along. And for me, it was kind of reversed in a way. So I don't know that I necessarily have all the suggestions how to do that. But in terms of the workflow, early on, I did put a lot of time into like making reels, trying to make the videos and stuff. That was one thing I did spend time doing. And what's funny is I used to always have my tripod set up, do the time lapse, and it does drive me kind of crazy because it's my least, you get in the workflow, in the flow state of painting a mural, and then you're like, oh, hold on, let me just stop. I'm listening to a podcast like yours or something. And I'm like, oh man, I've got to pause it to set this up. It's frustrating when you're in the rhythm of painting. So what I do now more is I've scaled it back real far. I don't do too many time lapses. Maybe I'll do a quick 30 minutes here and there while I'm painting. But I just take my camera, I hold up my phone, do one brush stroke, put it down. When I get to another color, I do it again. And I just clip it together, put the reel out there. I truthfully don't spend as much time now with the editing and stuff because I've seen the reels that I'll spend the longest editing and trying to make good, no one sees. And then I'll make something that's garbage, in my opinion, and it gets a gazillion views. And
Yeah.
it's so backwards. So I try not to think about it too much, to be honest. I just try to make it as easy on me in terms of my workflow because it really is disrupting. It sounds a little dramatic, but it really is annoying to stop, put down the brush, pick up to film. Yeah.
No,
Yeah, and
yeah.
if you're ahead of the sun, you don't want your phone overheating because it's trying to take video, but it's in full sun, and then you're like, oh wait, but
Yeah.
now I don't have music, and it's a
Yeah.
lot. It's definitely a lot. Well, speaking of, are there any boundaries that you have put in place that help you decide what you share and what you don't share on social media? And can you give us a little more detail about that?
Yeah, I actually just had a conversation the other day with my husband because I was telling him about like one time I was painting in a public space and like this stranger who follows me online came and gave me a present. And they knew I was
Oh,
there because I had been posting online. Now, this was in a really busy outdoor area, tons of, it wasn't like a dangerous situation. But one thing that comes to mind is like, I was working until 1 a.m. one time in a business alone. I was locked inside, so it's not like it was open to the public. But when I was working that night, like I'm not sharing that in my stories because I don't want people knowing where I am if it's in a dangerous situation, because it really is sometimes, there was a few times I was out using my projector when it's dark on a site somewhere where you don't want someone coming along if they know you're there. So that's certainly something that I keep in mind in terms of what I'm sharing.
Yeah, you're
yeah.
definitely like, we're gonna create the pictures and the videos, but we're gonna share this once I'm home, like in my driveway, post it in my
Yes,
car, and then I'll like walk
Uh-huh.
inside and be
exactly. I'll
done.
take the videos sometimes, but then I post them a few hours later when I'm not there anymore.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, that sounds perfect. Yeah. How about another boundary? I've seen some artists say they won't do things like show their actual sketching process. Like they won't show the
Mm.
iPads or things like that. Is that another boundary that you've put in place, or do you like to show a little bit of it?
I try to show some of it. The reason I don't show as much, truthfully, is because when I'm working on sketches, it's for a client. It's not like I'm creating art
Mm,
like out of my purely own style. A lot of time it's like for a client where I don't even know if I have their approval for it yet. Like even just, I just
Hmm.
posted part of a mural I'm doing that. I don't even know if that's what they're going to pick. You
right.
know, I
Yeah.
don't know if it's even going to go forward. And um, so for me, I love sharing my process. I love being transparent. People message me questions and I am always happy to answer and help, and definitely not a gatekeeper of how I create designs, but sometimes the design creating process for what I do is a little strange because it's client work and it's not like for me, if that makes sense.
Yep, it does. 100%.
Mhm.
That totally makes sense, especially just from a logistics boundary of phone memory. I feel like that's a common thing that so many of us artists being like, okay, well, I can't store 10 time lapse of every iteration of this design just to post the one they pick in like 2 months, because
Right.
then it becomes a storage issue and there's so
It's
many
so funny
cons.
too. When I'm designing, it's I'm a mess. I haven't done, you know how some people do, like they're sitting, all these Instagram creators are sitting at their fancy desk and they're like in
Sipping
their
a
fancy
cup of
clothes. Heck
tea
no,
and
when
like
I am drawing on my
beautiful.
iPad, I'm like in my sweats, curled on my couch, like looking like I don't know, a gremlin.
Totally relatable,
Same,
honestly.
But I mean,
Yeah.
same.
people probably like to see that. I know people want the real deal, So
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily opposed to it. It's just like it's weird. I'm not going to sit on my tripod well.
I know. Plus, whatever goes on the internet stays there forever.
That's
So
true.
sometimes there are some pairs of pajamas that should never be seen.
Yeah.
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 Covered in
And I think
paint too.
that's really the cool part about social media too. As most people that follow other artists or that post content on their own, like we as the business owners really get to decide, okay, this is what I enjoy sharing, this is what I'm comfortable sharing.
Mhm.
Maybe having a little bit of strategy of like why you're sharing certain things, but otherwise it's like we don't owe anyone, like you don't have to show your drawing process. You don't even
Yeah.
have to show, to your point, like the time lapse. Be like, actually, like I've tried it before. It was fine. I kind of enjoy it, but I much rather, from a process standpoint, take 2 to 3 second clips throughout the process, compile them together, and then
Yeah.
show the after.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the really cool parts about sharing on social media, which if we have any emerging artists or people that are kind of new to getting into the social media pictures, making videos space, is really just trying a little bit of everything and see what works for you, because there's not one size fits all way that you have to do it. Um, and just figuring out, yeah, what you enjoy showing.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, next up, we love to ask all our guests how they define success. But first, we're going to put in a quick word from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by our Level Up Artist courses.
We understand that life as a modern artist can be both exciting and overwhelming. Plus, there's a lot of information out there. So, what do visual artists actually need?
We've spent countless hours of trial and error, weeding through tons of information to find the gold, so you don't have to waste your time going down those endless rabbit holes.
In addition to weekly calls, we have created video course modules to cover everything from artist documents to exhibition prep, social media to technology, sales strategies, artist mindset, PDF resources, templates, and so much more.
Ready to get started? Head on over to levelupartists.com to learn more, get immediate access, and level up your career today.
Welcome back, everyone. So, a question we love to ask our guests is, how do you define success as an artist?
Oh man. So it's a good question. It's hard. That's a hard one to answer. Success in life, I don't think is a financial thing. Obviously, how happy you are, how your work-life balance is. But in my mind, just being able to create art as my job at all is success. It's not something I always thought was feasible. So now that I'm doing it, I'm kind of like, wait, is this real? And it really is just awesome and fun. And, I consider that to be a success for me. But I think it's a goalpost that's constantly moving. This year I was able to match what I was earning as a teacher,
Nice.
financially. And will be making more than that, obviously, in the course of the year, which is a huge success for me. In my mind, even when I quit teaching, I didn't think that would be the case. I just thought, oh, I'm just gonna create my art. I'm home with my kids a lot. We didn't really talk about that at all yet, but like I'm not working 5 days a week as an artist. I'm putting in a lot of hours, but it's after bedtime or early in the morning. And then, weeks I'm painting, I'm really packing in the hours, but my schedule is mishmash. So to be able to earn what I did working full-time as a teacher, putting in insane hours and just like so much work,
Yeah.
just amazing to me.
And the fact that you would have then had to be paying for childcare while you were working as a teacher. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, it's
exactly.
not just all the money that you're making, but also the money you're
Money you're
saving by being
saving.
able to be home and the
Yeah.
memories that you're building with them. And that's
And
incredible.
right. And all that I'm able to be home with them, because it really is. I mean, my daughter's about to start kindergarten next week and I could just cry thinking of that. I just don't know where the last years went. So it's really great it's just the perfect job for a parent to be able to make my schedule, even when it's crazy and even when I'm working really late, I'm able to make it. So it's really great.
I
Yeah,
love
it's
that.
good that a lot of it is remote. A lot of what we do is
Yeah.
admin, for better or worse. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
you can be with
And you
them
can
during
have
that
the
time.
picture perfect office or be snuggled up on the couch while they're watching
Mhm.
cartoons and you can be, okay, let me like finish up this mock-up. And to your point, one thing that we talk to a lot of artists about is that ability to like, you can put your foot on the gas when the season allows for it, but you can also pull back when the seasons require it. Like,
Exactly.
and being able to ebb and flow with that, being like, you know what, like school is coming up, so you may have a little bit extra time, or being like, okay, it's summer break, like I'm not necessarily going to be having these big chunks of time, or I'm
Exactly.
having to coordinate other logistics.
This year for me was that in a nutshell. Like I had a baby in February and it was a little bit of a surprise. So like last year I was gearing up, like I was just I was booking all these mural jobs and then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant. And that just like really, I had to take a huge step back and totally restructure. But I mean, I will get back, you know what I mean? I've been pretty busy this year, all things considered. And like this summer, I've been home a lot with my kids more than I was in the spring. It's just,
Yeah.
it's a roller coaster and making it work.
It's a wonderful one. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful one.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, what is one piece of advice that you wish you had heard before you got started on your creative journey?
Gosh, I think just that it's possible to do it. Obviously, like we spoke about already, I didn't consider it a real career opportunity. And it truly is. And that's not to say it's not a ton of hard work. There's a lot about running an art business that I did not even realize just 2 years ago. That is huge learning curve for me. It's not just painting and it's not just the pretty reels on Instagram. So it's hard, but you can do it. I just wish I really considered it earlier in my life because it took until like my mid 30s to really get started. And I'm super envious of people who figure this out and go to art school and, learn all the things, which I did love my time teaching, but I just feel like I took a little longer to get started. So.
And Rachel, don't feel bad. Like I also started mid 30s, and honestly, I think the life experience that you got dealing with let's call it institutional staff, with parents, with kids,
Mm,
like that's the kind of experience that you need to be able to deal with clients. So it
that
actually
is true.
translates versus like someone that gets started like right out of school, they don't have that life experience, so they
That's
don't
true.
know what corporate clients are like, and they could mess
Right.
that one up real quick. Not saying that you will, but they
Yeah.
could. Versus you've already dealt, I'm sure you've dealt with difficult people. So, and you see a client
Oh my
coming,
gosh.
you're
Yeah.
like, you already know how to deal with it. So yeah, don't feel bad. No, this is good. This is
That's
good.
such a good way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, it all translates. I feel like It's one of those things too where sometimes, and I'm glad you're telling everybody, like as we record this, of like everybody can be an artist and everybody can do murals and things like that. Because we definitely meet a lot of people of like I'm not a real artist and things like
Mhm.
that. And one of the advice we love to share forward is every brush stroke counts. Like every creative thing that you do,
Yeah.
it can all be translated, or a lot of it can. So absolutely love that. Now, Rachel, if someone randomly handed you $100, what would you splurge on or invest in? It has to be something that brings you joy and relates to your art business.
Oh man, so I would okay, I don't know if this is the best answer, but I would probably go right to the Container Store. I
Okay.
we recently moved like all the bedrooms around with my kids with having the baby, and we shoved all of my art and like our office stuff into my son's old room, and it needs a full, I have not had a time to like fully reorganize it. So I love all the organization stuff. It just makes me so happy. Like that is, organizing things makes me really happy, and I need to do that. So I would probably do that right now.
I can totally relate. I've been doing that with totes for the paint because I've already learned what happens when a lid is not all the way in and it tips over in your car. Now there's teal in the back of a little bit, just a little bit. But now I'm like, yeah, no, I'm also like, ooh, I want like a tote that connects to another one, and
Yeah.
this one has a drawer and the brushes go in it, and this one has the chalk,
With the interlocking and whoo.
right? Yeah. Oh my God. Okay, Jackie, we need a separate episode on this, on
Yes.
the pack out, the mural pack out.
Organization.
Speaking
Yes.
our love language, is the organization. Get some pegboards going. You'll be ready to go.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, besides organizing your studio space, what exciting projects do you have coming up that our listeners should know about?
Yeah, so I do have, like I mentioned earlier, I'm doing those huge four murals at that it's Sweetwater Town Center in Apex. So I did one of them back in the spring, and then the others just because of timing with like new construction getting pushed back, they kept getting pushed back. So in September and October, I'm going to be finishing three more. So I'm going to be really busy. I'll be out there. And I think Sweetwater is having like a big grand opening sometime in October. So there's a bunch of new shops and there's apartments there and all sorts of stuff happening. They're going to have a big green lawn for events. So if you find yourself there, go check out some of the murals. They're in breezeways in the buildings.
Amazing. We're so excited to come see them, maybe see them in progress. And we just appreciate so much you sharing your wisdom, sharing your experience and your journey with our listeners. But before you go, how can they stay connected with you after they listen to this episode?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram, and my Instagram is at rachelwritesnc. Or just at Rachel Writes NC. My website is rachelwritesnc.com. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Perfect. We'll definitely make sure to share these in the show notes. So thank you so much for being on the podcast with us today.
Thank you for having me. This was a real treat.
Yeah, it was. So in the meantime, for our listeners, if you want to stay connected with us in between episodes, share your feedback, or have a question you would like for us to answer on the podcast, you can reach us through social media. I'm at Amay Art across all platforms.
And I'm at J Sanders Studio across all platforms. And if you want to follow the podcast, we're at Level Up Artist on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.